beginning with the Ask the Expert section. Today we have Michelle Edwards, who is a researcher and educator. So, Michelle, what specific training or certification do you have in this area?
I have an undergraduate degree from Rice University, a master's degree from Texas State University, and a PhD from Washington State University, all in the area of sociology. So that is my area of expertise.
And what are the biggest challenges you face in this field?
I think right now, one of the challenges that I feel like many sociologists are facing is a sense that what we teach students is seen as political. And especially since I work at a state institution, I think that it can be very challenging to talk about the things that we are trained in as sociologists without worrying that we are in some ways like, how do we navigate the politics of our state and of our nation as sociologists? I would say that's kind of my biggest concern right now.
And what are typical tasks and responsibilities for someone in your role?
So I'm an associate professor at Texas State University. And so my role, and I'm also tenured. And so my role typically includes the same kinds of things that other tenured folks experience, which is teaching, research, and service. And so those are kind of the big three parts of my career. So teaching, I teach undergraduate and graduate courses. Research, I am required as part of our job to publish, in our case, at least one journal article a year. And then, as well as just have ongoing research. And then, in terms of service, I am part of a number of different committees and just kind of the day-to-day process of running the university.
What are the pros and cons of your career path?
Several pros. So, one of the biggest pros for me is the ability to work with students. I think for me, that's the thing that brings me the most joy, that inspires me the most, and that just really it's those relationships with students and as well with my other faculty members that makes me want to keep going to work every day. Some of the things that are also perks of the job that I really appreciate. I am a working mom, and I really like that this is a job that has flexibility, both in terms of when I can work within some extent. I do teach in person classes that are at certain times, but otherwise, I can work when works for me. So, in terms of doing my writing or grading or other kinds of things as part of the job, I'm able to come up with my own schedule. And I think that that is, and without a lot of micromanaging on the part of my university. And so I think that's really very meaningful to me. And then in terms of challenges, um, I would say like I mentioned earlier, the kind of continued political challenges that we face as members of higher ed, the feeling that our work is not necessarily valued, that we're not seen as experts in the field so much as like folks with an agenda. I think that that makes the job quite difficult. And and at the end of the day, my goal is to teach all of my students to critically engage with material and to better understand what it means to be a sociologist. And so I think that this year in particular, like I mentioned, that has been a troubling part of the job. Working at a state institution like Texas State, we definitely face challenges with pay that's a little bit different than some of our colleagues in private institutions. And so those are concerns of mine. I'm concerned about as well just the challenge of worrying about my students, especially at Texas State when we have so many that are first gen students that are facing financial challenges, mental health challenges. And so I think that's another thing about the job that I didn't necessarily think a lot about in going into academia, which is that I do have a tendency to take on those worries myself as well. And so I have a lot of empathy for the other folks in my program. And then I think that can be wearing sometimes.
So, how does one transition from a more general role to this area of expertise?
So I'm an environmental sociologist. That's my training. I also have training in research methods, so particularly survey research. Although most of my research is actually qualitative, so I do a lot of interviews with folks. In terms of how people can go from just being excited about sociology to really diving into a specific area, what I did was just really start to spend more time in that literature. So, like reading articles by folks who are environmental sociologists, as well as potentially working with, that's always the ideal, is that you get a chance to work, especially if you're a student, getting a chance to work with someone who has that expertise. And so for me, both in terms of environmental sociology and in terms of survey research, the it was the relationships that I built with folks in those fields that really excited me about these subfields. And so that's something that for me has really pushed me in certain directions, especially survey research. I've always loved environmental issues. I did not know I was going to like learning about survey research until I worked with Don Dillman at Washington State University. So, having a mentor who's in that area, I think can be really helpful for getting you excited about that subtopic. I feel like if you find something you're interested in and you spend time with that, I think that that will make your career more enjoyable than trying to force something that you're not as interested in.
Thank you, Michelle, for joining us today for Ask the Expert.